Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 3 preview brought to you by QuinnBet. We have 13 games in the Sunday slate, 7 in the early window from 6 o'clock this weekend, 5 in the 9 o'clock window. Then Sunday Night Football sees the Chiefs take on the Falcons in Atlanta in the early hours. For the second week in a row, by the way, we have an AFC East clash on Thursday. The Jets hosting the Patriots tonight at the time that we're recording here or streaming live for those watching us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and X indeed. Welcome to all of you. You can check out our preview of the Thursday Night Football matchup in our TNF podcast, where Shane and Kieran O'Donovan broke that all down. But let's get to segment 1 of our Week 3 preview now. The Sunday games brought to you by RuPoint. It's Shane Brennan, Noel Dowling, Kieran Boyle, and myself, Conor Brophy, on deck here. Usual format, 3 of us will weigh in on each game, and then we'll give you our picks at the end. We start off with Giants at Browns. Kieran, you're first up on this one. The Browns took a bit of a pacing from the Cowboys week 1, bounced back with an unusual win against the Jags in week 2, where they somehow managed to overcome, giving up 13 penalties for over 100 yards. Not so sure how much that was down to their own skills as it was down to the incompetence of the Jags. But either way, they evened up their record at 1-1. And without being disparaging of your Giants, they probably won't see this as the toughest task in the world based on where they are at the moment.
It's probably not the hardest game the Giants will have this year, and the Browns didn't exactly light it up against the Jags last week. They were stop-start offensively, but it's hard to see any light for the Giants right now. I mean, that Browns defense is coming into play, and you have to think that they're going to have the way with this Giants offense. And again, the crazy thing with the Giants this year is the major issue they've had for years is the O-line. They fixed the O-line, and the rest of the team has not kept up with the project. The secondary has been very disappointing. Again, your edge, Kayvon Thibodeau, has been disappointing. And Brian Burns has been basically non-existent. So you have to think that the Browns are going to come in there with a lot of confidence. Deshaun Watson got a little bit better last week. Definitely not as bad as he was the first week. He'll probably be, relishing that challenge of playing the Giants at home. This is the 18th straight game the Giants have been underdogs. I got no reason to believe that they have any chance of winning this. They're allowing 41 yards per opponent possession, which is it's terrible. I mean, it's everywhere you look, and that's notwithstanding the issues they've had with the kicker this past week, all the stuff that's coming out. And now the last couple of days there's been talk about their Tennessee Volunteers wide receiver Jalen Hyatt that they got, who apparently is either falling out with Dable or he's out of favor or something's going on because he hasn't even seen the ball the first 2 weeks. So disquiet everywhere. It's almost like the Giants are overshadowing the Deshaun Watson story with all their dysfunction going on. As a Giants fan, I'm not hopeful at all, even if the game was at home for the Giants. But the fact that it's in Cleveland, get that crowd behind them, the defense starts purring, and Jones is gonna feel the pressure. I can't see any other win but a Browns win by 7.
No, the Browns are indeed favoured by 7. I suppose it says something about the state of the Giants right now, or their perceived state as far as the bookies are concerned, that the Browns, who haven't exactly been shooting the lights out, as we've been saying, can be as high as 7-point favourites.
Yeah, I think Kieran covered a lot there. Just at the moment, it feels like a bit of a cloud around MetLife for the Giants, where you just feel like things aren't going the way they want them to. Then on the field, for me, this game comes down to a Browns defense, which Kieran again mentioned. I think that's the only kind of outstanding side of the ball for either team that will be going out onto the pitch this week, and I think it's going to be strong enough to kind of dictate the game. I think it'll probably be a lower scoring game. Deshaun Watson, as was mentioned, is slightly better last week than he had been, and I think they'll probably just have enough on offense, the Browns, to get the points they need. I mean, even looking at the Giants, they made history there at the weekend. The only team to ever score 3 or more touchdowns without giving up a touchdown to still lose the game in regulation. It's when things like that start going against you, you just kind of feel that something's not right. And I think at this weekend, the Browns, because of that defense, it's fair enough that they're the favourites. I think they should just about be strong enough to take out a Giants team that just looks a bit just not right at the moment, even with the kicking situation as well. It's just all of it just doesn't seem to be boding well at the moment.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with what a lot of both of you have been saying there. It's strength on weakness both ways, really. It's two pretty good defenses. Browns probably have the edge there up against two very anemic offenses. I mean, we did, to be fair, Kieran, you called him out early on the season, and we were looking forward to seeing him. And Malik Neighbours, despite that very costly drop at the end of the game, did actually have a really good game last week. He did top 100 yards. I think he's only going to get better and better as the season goes. At least that's one maybe slight glimmer of hope you got from a New York perspective. But that Browns defense at all levels is very strong still, notwithstanding the beatdown they took from the Cowboys in week 1. Secondary showed up particularly well, really made life difficult for Trevor Lawrence in terms of his limited options downfield for the Jags last week. And I expect very similar of an even more limited offense as far as the Giants are concerned. And I think that's going to be probably the crucial factor here. I'm not sure that the Browns are necessarily going to cover the spread. I fancy the Giants to keep it closer than 7 points, but I don't think we're going to be seeing a score fest here. Although having said that, when you expect these games to be low scoring, it'll end up being 41-39 or something crazy like that. But I do see Cleveland coming out on top. Shane, your pick.
I am back in the big blue and why not? I think the Giants will actually be able to do this one.
We got another game next with a heavy home favorite as the Bucs host the Broncos. Bucs favored by 6 in that one, Shane, which is hardly surprising considering what we've seen the Bucs and particularly Baker Mayfield and that offense do over the last couple of weeks. They've been lighting it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that we're sitting here 2 weeks into the season and the conversation around Tampa Bay is already that Baker Mayfield is an MVP candidate, which I'm not, maybe is a slight overreaction to just how particularly well the Bucs as a team in general have played. I mean, they were still outplayed in terms of yards gained by the Lions the weekend was gone, but Baker Mayfield has showed poise, has showed character. And what's even important as well is that his offense isn't just being based on one particular target or one particular way of playing football. And what we saw against the Lions, the fact that Baker Mayfield has options of people to throw the ball to. A lot of Chris Godwin ended up getting 7 receptions for well over 100 yards. Of course, we know he has Mike Allen. On rushing, Rashad White and Bucky Irving is around there. But mind you, Baker Mayfield was still the kind of main rushing man, a quarterback against the Lions there. But it's quite clear that when you compare it to what the situation in Denver, when Bo Nix is sitting there, is quite clearly really not settling into life as an NFL quarterback, has 0 touchdowns or 4 interceptions. It really shows you the difference between having or the ability to rehabilitate a talent who has come into the league, who then earns his NFL stripes, but you find the talent that he has that made Baker Mayfield such a high draft pick and extrapolate that and build him into a player who is really settling into that Tampa Bay setup. In comparison to the approach that Denver are taking now at the moment, they obviously tried rehabilitating an old NFL talent in Russell Wilson, but they're now putting all their chips behind Bo Nix, who just looked, I guess, spooked playing against the Steelers defense the last time out. I mean, fair enough, he got over 240 yards passing, but in terms of situations, in terms of being able to read the game and look like he's confident enough to lead a Denver offense, when you compare it to what the Buccaneers have been able to do, it really is chalk and cheese.
So you're picking the Bucs there, I take it.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Buccaneers are going to win this, and I think this
in suspense. Yeah,
6 points are probably close.
Suspect we're only all going to go one way on this, but not to prejudge. Kieran, what do you think?
Yeah, there's a couple of games that could go either way, but I think this is as much as a lock as it can be in week 3. I love this Baker Mayfield version right now. I think, there's been a lot of great, quarterback stories the first couple of weeks, but this is the Baker. If anyone watches, anybody watched Baker in college, it's a great clip. If you go back on YouTube, Baker with Oklahoma played Ohio State in 2017. A lot of talking back and forth. He got the Oklahoma flag and he planted it right in the center field, right in Ohio Stadium. And that's kind of like the vibe that Baker's bringing back now. Everything's going right for him. He's staying injury-free. He's throwing it around. He's using his run game, even though Rashad White hasn't, he had a quiet game last week. But he's kind of weathered the doldrums he had with Carolina and Cleveland, and he's kind of thriving now. And it's great to see because he's had some bad press. He's had a couple of bad years in the league. And, a lot of players in that kind of position might have, dwindled back to being a backup or even a third stringer. Broncos are averaging less than a point per drive. They're averaging 0.85 per drive right now. And that's, in Pop Warner or in, youth football, that's not getting you a win. The Bucs have a 53% success rate on passing plays through 2 weeks. And that's shown why they've got a 2-0 record so far. I'm really high on Baker right now. I think he's a great story in the league. On the flip side, with the Broncos, again, it comes down to talent. We talk about the Panthers and their lack of talent. It comes to the Broncos too. Cortland Sutton, and that's pretty much it. You know, not Jerry Jeudy, but Jarrett Stidham might be, you know, getting ready on the bench if the Bo Nix story continues the way it's going right now. And who knows, we might even see Zach Wilson. But this is as much of a lock you're going to get in week 3. This is it, Buccaneers.
Noel, the Bucs went into their game last week against the Lions pretty banged up on defense. You know, a couple of critical parts of that secondary, including Antoine Winfield Jr. out. They lost Vita Vea during the game. They're very talented and central nose tackle in more ways than one. If they were hosting anyone else, you might be slightly fearful, but it's hard to see Bo Nix taking much advantage of the relative opportunity that's offered there.
No, look, the guys have covered it already. I mean, Bo Nix it's the wrong team for a rookie quarterback to be starting. If we look at, say, for example, New England, although New England have turned out to be better than had been predicted pre-season, you know, they've rested Drake, or not rested, but they've sat Drake May because they didn't want to maybe put a young quarterback into a position that may have been too much for that player to start his NFL career. Well, I mean, Sean Payton has done unfortunately for them, a terrible job with Bo Nix. I mean, I think he's 77 attempts, which is the third most in the NFL. This is a rookie quarterback who has nothing around him, and they haven't thrown so much. It's been mentioned that they've the 30th score in offense and the 29 total yards in offense in the league. They just can't get anything going. This quarterback in there is, you can't imagine a worse situation than maybe Carolina for a quarterback to be stuck in there with nobody around him, and it's just not going to get any better against this Bucs team that, as we say, really fought for everything against the Lions. You know, Godwin is looking good. You've got Mike Evans there. You know, Baker Mayfield looks like he's really, really reinvigorated his career. And for this game coming up, Kieran said it, this is as close to a lock as you're going to get. The Broncos just have nothing this season, and the Bucs are on high form, so you know, this could be anything.
I'm also going Tampa Bay here, and while we're on the subject of NFC South teams, lighten it up, we're onto another one of them at home this next game where the Eagles travel to New Orleans to meet the resurgent Saints. Saints favored by 3 in that one. That line has moved out a little bit from 1.5, probably courtesy of the Falcons' victory against the Eagles on Monday. Saints offense obviously operating at an incredibly high gear. It's funny that we've been talking this season about the relative lack of passing offense in the NFL and the relative lack of passing touchdowns, and it's way down the average over the past couple of weeks of the season and compared to where we've been over the past couple of weeks of previous seasons over the past 4 or 5 years. Saints, alongside the Bucs, actually, one of the honorable exceptions to that. They have been just slinging the ball all over the field. Derek Carr has more explosive plays, more long touchdowns than any other quarterback in the league. And they seem to have the deep ball. Rashid Shaheed has been an absolutely critical part with 2 long touchdowns. They've been able to stretch the field. They have Alvin Kamara cutting through the gaps that O-line are creating for them. Defensively, they've been really solid. Gave Dak Prescott and the Cowboys fits last week. Paulson Adebo with a particularly impressive interception for them there in that Saints secondary. I think the Eagles have some work to do on that part of the field themselves, probably not as strong as we expected them to be. I think CJ Gardner-Johnson has had a difficult transition back from Detroit, gave up a couple of big plays last week. They haven't been the force that we expected them to be. Certainly their defensive front hasn't got the same pressure on quarterbacks that we would have anticipated that they would have done. I'm sure these are things that they will get right as the season goes. They're too talent rich in Philadelphia not to, but right now it's not working. They've had a bad outing against the Falcons, as we were saying on Monday night. I don't see it getting better against their NFC South opponents in this game, which is ironic. You would have thought the Eagles would have been happy to run the NFC South this year, but I don't think they're going to have any joy until they get to the Panthers, the way things are going there. And I think they will move out of here with another L, which is going to concern them at this stage in the season. I think the Saints keep marching on. Kieran.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think this is the Saints roller coaster continuing on at home. This is a great time for the Saints to play the Eagles. That was a very strange game Monday night against the Falcons. Neither team really got it going, but you know, there's more fault lays with the Eagles with how they played. You know, it's without AJ Brown, it's a different offense. Everybody knows that's going to Devonta Smith, so you know, obviously he's getting doubled up, and he's not the biggest guy anyway. It's difficult for him to get separation with 2 6-foot+ kind of DBs wrapped around him. And, you know, Saquon, again, everyone knows Saquon's going to get the ball too. So you wrap it up a little bit. the only bright spark for me with the Eagles right now, and I think I'll preface that by saying things will even out when AJ Brown comes back. It's a totally different team without him in there. But Quinyon Mitchell, I mean, he almost had a pick six with against the Falcons the other night. I mean, he was really good. He continues his great start of the season. But that Eagles pass rush was MIA last week. I mean, they just sat back and I think they only touched Cousins once, and that was a sack. I mean, he was as rough as he looked, and as with the timing off that he had, he was still only touched once. I like the Derek Carr train to continue home. It's going to be a home game. Get that kind of Saints who dat crowd going in New Orleans. I think it's going to be the Saints by 3.
Shane?
Yeah, it's kind of weird that we're sitting here and there's so much negativity being heaped on an Eagles team, which I think, as you rightly mentioned, Connor, have all the talent to really be exceptionally strong, and to look at this NFC South and see that you can pick off each of the 4 of them quite easily. But the fact is, that's just not how things have been playing out. I mean, on the Eagles side of things, their run game defense hasn't been good enough. They're averaging 5. Our teams who are playing against them are averaging 5 yards per run. Their pass defense isn't good enough, as Kieran alluded to. They only got 1 sack on Kirk Cousins. And even when they are playing that secondary defense, they're not getting close enough to receivers. I mean, obviously, they made the decision to play the prevent defense in that game-winning run that Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta offense had. Which, when you make that, okay, you sacrifice not getting to the quarterback in order to make sure that receivers don't get room. And if they do get room, limit how many yards they get after catch. And that wasn't up to standard at all. It was very bad pass defense in a moment when it really mattered. So for me, I think the key is as to whether the offense can really score enough points to outpace the Saints, who are coming at home. There will be a great buzz. The ticket prices in New Orleans are sky high for this game because there's a real buzz around the New Orleans team. Derek Carr, by the way, who is averaging over 15 yards per passing attempt. That is a ridiculous statistic in terms of how well he's been going.
And to put that in context, Shane, like 8 yards per passing attempt is considered a really good figure. This guy is just doubling up on that nearly.
It's Madden stuff. You know what I mean? Even some of the passes that he pulled off to Raheem Shaheed against the Cowboys was just unbelievable. And he's really going for it deep, but he's confident. And it's obviously that the way that they've designed their offense is going exceptionally well. And I've seen no reason to think that the Saints are going to veer away from that. I think there's every reason to believe that they're going to come into this bouncing and get the scoring going early on.
Noel, your pick?
Eagles.
Ooh, well, that's good to see somebody going against the trend. Anyway, keep it interesting.
I don't know where I was going when you were asking me.
No, you're back up now. We've Bears traveling to Indianapolis to play the Colts. Colts favored by 2 in that one. Neither team coming off a particularly strong outing. What way is it going to shake out?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I think neither fan base really predicted after only 2 games that the teams would be where they are. I mean, the Bears fans may have predicted it record-wise, but they would definitely not have predicted how this offense, which a lot of hope was put on, would be playing the way it is. For me, this is a big one. This comes down to the Bears O-line versus the Colts D-line. Obviously, the Colts lose to Forrest Buckner, which will be a big loss for them, and a little bit of a ray of hope there for the Bears. But when you look at the Colts defense in terms of the run game, they've been allowing 237 rushing yards per game, which no other team is over 200. So that kind of shows the gaps they have there. Whereas on the flip side, the Bears have no running game essentially at the moment. I think they've 155 yards in total, which is 3.5 yards per carry. So something's going to have to give here. Either that Colts defense will step it up and have a game, or the Bears run game will step it up. And I'm thinking the Bears are going to have to concentrate on that run game. We all see the struggles Caleb Williams has, and they need to take pressure off that young quarterback. So for me, I think the Bears need to look at running the ball, taking advantage of what the Colts will be hoping that it's the Bears, great, but the Bears should be looking at it and saying, right, this Colts team aren't stopping anyone. We need to get this run game going. This is the weekend to do it. Because on the flip side, obviously you've got a Bears defense, which I think will stand up fairly well to the Colts. I think this Bears defense is strong enough to have a good game, to keep the Colts in check. I know Al Pierce so far has had a good season with a couple of touchdowns, but I think Richardson is he has the talent, he has the arm, but he's a bit hit and miss, and I think the Bears can really put this young quarterback under pressure. So for me, the Bears defense will be fine. The Bears offense has to step up with the run game, and they need to take advantage of this. And I think they're going to sneak one. So I think the Bears will get one. So yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, I think this one's pretty much 50-50 for me. As you say, Noel, it's very hard to get away from the travails of that Bears O-line. You're thinking, as you say, look, the Packers had 260 rushing yards by half time against the Colts last weekend. They were just doing it at will. They didn't even have to, I think Malik Wallace only had to throw 2 passes in the first half. They were able to do whatever the hell they wanted. Ideally, that's something that the Bears would want to do, but we haven't seen them spring DeAndre Swift at all. Considering they ran the ball relatively well last year, that's been a bit of a mystery. Caleb Williams played better last week, which is remarkable considering he ended up on his ass 7 times, and they just got to protect him better. I mean, it wasn't just that they were letting the pass rush get to him. Like, the Texans were getting clean shots at him. Darnell Wright in particular, absolutely exposed. Caleb took a couple of hard shots. You cannot let your quarterback in that kind of jeopardy week in, week out. It's deeply concerning from a Bears perspective. Should they get a little bit more solidity, and certainly having DeForest Buckner out, I think they'll have a better chance of taking a win here. We got to remember that Bears defense is playing pretty much lights out at the moment. To hold the Texans to 19 points and 1 passing touchdown, considering how well CJ Stroud played in that game, and he was sensational under pressure, is some achievement by the Bears defense, considering, of course, that they wouldn't have had great field position throughout the game because of what was happening on the other side of the ball. Colts playing at home, though, I think they're going to just about sneak it, grieved though I am to say that. Shane?
Yeah, I can understand why there is, I think, a greater sense of hope in Chicago that this game could be a win, especially after the bruising experience it was playing against Texans. Considering, as you mentioned there earlier, Caleb Williams took 7 sacks, but remember, the line of scrimmage defenders from the Colts got 0 sacks against the Green Bay Packers last week. Now, I know that stat might be a little bit skewed by the fact that the Packers played a heavily run game, but still, I think that this will be a game where Caleb Williams might be given a bit more room to breathe. And look, like, I think there's, in reaction to that loss, you know, the internet does what the internet does. They reacted, I think, a little bit too much to Caleb Williams, and I think all the hype around him. He needs a bit of time to settle in. I think I said it on this podcast beforehand that game in London, that until you get to that point, things are going to go up, things are going to go down. Things are going to work well. Things aren't. It's still a bit of a learning curve for Caleb. You can tell that there's a few plays in that game against the Texans where, you know, if he ran around and he, in his experience, knew that if he was in college, you can get a 40-yard run out of trying to get away from some of these defenders. Where he knows in the NFL, it's not going to do that. All of that said, I think the Colts are going to win this game, and I'm going to put it down for 2 reasons. One, Anthony Richardson, I think, is an excellent passer, but you can tell a little bit like a rookie. He had a bit of an off game last week, and I think he'll be a little bit more conservative, but in a way that what will work for the Colts in a tight game. And 2, Jonathan Taylor is averaging over 8 yards a run against a very strong Green Bay defense in Green Bay. And I think by the time the Bears get to Indianapolis, I think the run game for Indianapolis might be able to eke out a tight one here.
All right, Kieran, your pick before we move on.
Oh, I like a nice bounce back week for the Bears. Give me Bears.
All right, we'll hand the ball off to you again for Texans Vikings, which has Texans favored by 2 here on the road. I, to be honest, thought they'd be worth slightly more than that. But before I get to my reasons for that, what do you think?
Well, it's probably like that because of the defenses. You know, that might have something to do with the 2 stout defenses just playing their hearts out and just balling out this week. And speaking of balling out, the Vikings are, I mean, I don't think a lot of people saw this coming, especially with the Darnold story. Darnold's completed 72% of his passes, averaging 238 yards per game. Nobody in the NFL saw that coming. This is the reclamation project of the NFL this year. How long does it go? Who knows? But right now it's going really well. He's got a really good supporting cast. A couple of weeks ago, when the Vikings played the Giants, I wasn't as sold on the supporting cast for the Vikings, but after watching them the last couple of weeks, that's just it's a really good team. It's a really solid team. That O-line is one of the top ones in the NFL. Again, I'll preach about Darisaw till the sun goes down, and just the weapons that he has right now. The only concern I have with the Vikings, obviously, is Justin Jefferson. Will he be good to go? He got that quad injury last week after that catch, or a couple of plays after the catch. But that's the big question mark for me. But again, the Texans, one of my picks for the Super Bowl. I mean, they're just Nico Collins had a phenomenal week last week, and when you got Joe Mixon running the ball up and down the field, I mean, it's just going to be. This is probably one of the matchups of the week for me. I'm really looking forward to this one. I mean, the Vikings held the 49ers run game to 102 rushing yards with Mason last week, so that's a measure of what they can do. And it's just a battle of these really two great defenses. I do like a fairly high scoring game in relative terms with the way the NFL is right now with offense, but I can't wait to watch this one. This is going to be a real good kind of ding dong battle of almost last team that scores wins. I'm sorry. Really looking forward to this, but I like the Vikings. I think the Darnold train is going to keep going, and it's going to give the first loss to the Texans this year.
No, two great defenses, as Kieran said, and two pass rushers who swapped colours in the offseason, which is one of the intriguing subplots here. Danielle Hunter going from the Vikings to the Texans, Jonathan Grenard going the other way. Which of them ends up happier this weekend?
Well, Danielle Hunter is still stuck in my brain at the moment from watching him a few days ago, so I think he could be getting through there again. But no, look, Kieran's covered it all. These are two fantastic teams, two exciting teams. You look at his Texan team, and it is just stacked top to bottom. Then even on defense, we mentioned Danielle Hunter there, and then you look at Will Anderson Jr. Those two together are devastating when they get going. We look at the Vikings; they have a really good defense there as well. And Brian Flores does like to bring the odd blitz and stuff, so you never know what he might do there. So it's just an intriguing game from top to bottom. But I just think Sam Darnold has done really, really well, and it's going to be interesting to see if that can continue going. But for me, CJ Stroud and the weapons he has there, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell. The only question mark for me is Joe Mixon actually going to go this weekend? I know he had an injury and there was talk he might not. That would be a big loss to this team. We've seen how much he has actually added to this team. A big question last year on the Texans was, had they got that run game to complement that awesome air attack that they have? And Joe Mixon has come in and said, yeah, well, I can do that. Let's do it. So if he's missing, I mean, Cam Akers can come in, he's a good player, but he has a history of putting the ball on the ground, so that could kind of slow them down a bit. But I think if Joe Mixon is playing, I think the Texans win. And I think if Joe Mixon isn't playing, I think the Texans win. So we'll go Texans on that.
Yeah, I think a lot hinges, as you were saying, Kieran, on how fit Justin Jefferson is. If he's good to go and he's anywhere near his best, I think that gives the Vikings a puncher's chance. I don't think there's going to be much in it. I do think it's going to be a bit of a ding-dong, and this could be one of the games of the weekend. You have two balanced teams, two teams, particularly with the way Darnold has started the season and the way Kevin O'Connell has coached it, that can really move the ball well, that have a balanced attack, that have a good defense to back them up. I was very impressed, though, with how Stroud and the Texans handled the Bears defense last week, which, as we've already said when we were previewing that Colts game, it is, for me, one of the elite defenses in the NFL right now. Stroud under pressure, we saw him last season in his rookie season, surprise everybody with just how poised he is. And I'm, if anyone's going to throw something that's going to put him in the blender, it's Brian Flores. But somehow I just think Stroud has learned enough not to be rattled. Nico Collins is playing out of his skin at the moment. He's got so many options. I think, as you were saying, Noel, it is important as to whether Mixon can go or not, because that's the one thing that the Texans have to help them get through these trickier encounters, particularly on the road, is that they have a much more balanced attack this year. If they don't have that, that gives the Vikings, again, another thing that I might put in their corner as a puncher's chance. But I still do think Texans are the stronger team. I'm not so sure the Vikings formula is sustainable for the season ahead. It's been fun to watch, and they've gotten probably more out of what they have available to them than they could rightly have expected at this point in the season. I think sooner or later that comes to an end, and I think sooner is this weekend. I think the Texans are going to come out on top. Shane?
Yeah, I agree with you. The Texans are one of the best all-round teams in the NFL. I think they'll find a way to win this.
All right, let's take a break there, and we'll be back with our second segment of Week 3 picks right after this. back to the Irish NFL Show's Week 3 preview. That break brought to you by our partner Buskers on the Ball. Brian and Shane took a visit during the week. You can, of course, catch your NFL action there every Sunday with €6 pints from 6 p.m. Look out for our Buskers on the Ball content coming across our social channels this weekend. And thanks to the team at Buskers on the Ball for their continued support. Right, our second segment of Week 3 previews is brought to you by QuinBet. We kick off with Packers' trip to Tennessee to take on the Titans, Kieran, where Tennessee is favored by 2 points in Nashville.
Yeah, another head scratcher. It's been a weird couple of weeks for the Titans. I mean, I just saw today that Will Levis had to change his phone number because he's been getting a bunch of nasty phone calls and text messages from irate Tennessee fans over the last couple of weeks. And I made the statement last week that I expected it to be run heavy, and that he was going to have a quiet game. Well, I didn't factor him coughing the ball up and having his head coach ball him out on the sideline. So I have to think this week that they're going to go heavy with Tony Pollard. But this is going to be a real tough week for Levis on top of all the stuff that's going on in the background. He has got to tidy it up, or they're going to look for a change pretty soon because they can't afford these high profile turnovers, which is essentially cost them both games. I mean, they were in that Jets game all the way until those costly turnovers. And then
can I throw in a question here, though, considering how porous that O-line has been? Like, what's Daddy Callahan doing here? The reason he was brought across was to sort this out.
Yeah, well, O-line dominance and O-line strength is at a premium in the NFL. There's a lot of teams with, porous O-lines and not exactly stellar O-lines. It's not like the 80s and 90s. It's a different game now, but the Titans they're -4 in the turnover ratio, and Levis has been sacked 7 times. So as alluded to the O-line there. The Packers are going to come in, and it's going to be, it's one of those games where they know what to do. They know they need to rattle Levis. They know his head is probably all over the place with all the stuff that's been going on in the media. But saying all that, Titans have only allowed 1 rushing touchdown in the last 2 games. So, they're doing something right. And if they can cut down on all the waste and tighten up with the run game and give the ball to Tony Pollard. I expect a lot of Tony Pollard this week. 50% of Tennessee drives have failed to achieve a first down. That's a really startling and a concerning stat for me. But the Packer fans are going to come into Nashville. Nashville's a real big party town. They're going to be on Broadway. It's going to be a fun Sunday. But I actually like the Titans in this game. There's still a question mark whether Jordan Love will play. I just saw earlier today that they're holding an outside chance that he might be able to suit up. But I think they're still going to go with Willis. And I think that is still going to hamstring the Packers offense a little bit. This is going to be third time lucky for the Titans. They've got to get a win this week. I like them to pull off the win, get it at home, get the Nashville crowd hyped. Give me Tennessee.
We learned last week, Shane, that you bet against Matt LaFleur's game planning ability at your peril. He had the perfect plan to keep Malik Willis protected for just long enough, unleashed his legs when he needed to. And also he went 12 for 14 and was able to pass the ball efficiently. Tennessee is not the hardest place to get it done at the moment. Will they repeat the trick?
Yeah, you're right that LaFleur and the Packers definitely seem to have a superior game plan when it came to last weekend's game against the Colts, which is why I'm surprised when I'm looking at the betting here in QuinBet that the Titans are coming into this game as favorites. I'm not quite sure what they've done to earn that, or what the Packers have done to earn the title as underdogs. I think defensively they were very solid. They were able to keep wide receivers close. They were able to, maybe against the run game, they weren't always the best against the Colts. So if the Titans are going to lean into Tony Pollard, then maybe they have a really good chance here. But I'm not quite sure. Look, I know I've probably spoken bad about the Titans much, and I'm not a believer in Will Levis' ability at all. Not that he deserves any of the abuse he was getting, as Kieran was alluding to earlier. But I've never once have I sat down and watched him play and thought, yeah, this is a man who I can trust to go and find a game-winning drive. This is a man I can trust to take control of a game from start to finish. There was that time against the Dolphins last season where I thought he played well, but against the Jets, the weekend is gone, or against the Bears, he seems to. I just don't feel like he knows when to see a receiver and to sort of get it to him when the time is needs, and that's a big thing. When you look at some of the key matchups that the Titans have, I mean, D-Hop is still either questionable or out for the Titans. That's obviously a big blow for them in terms of in terms of talent. You know, they have Jair Alexander is a fantastic player to have in the secondary for Green Bay, and he's going to shut down anything that the Titans are going to throw at them in terms of the aerial game. So for that reason, unless Tony Pollard is going to end up, carrying 30 times, as Kieran suggested, and I think it would be a good game plan, I see no reason that the Packers can't go in and win this game, which is why I think they're going to get it done. And I think they're going to have a decent amount of control over this from start to finish.
No, the Packers would not have wished Jordan Love to be on IR, so anything that they get beyond 500 over that 4-week span is a bonus, right? So they started off well, they're 1-for-1, and a win here sets them in really good stead, all things considered. But Tennessee, you would probably feel in some ways offensively can't play any worse. And as Kieran was pointing out, defensively they haven't been too bad over the first 2 weeks. Arguably they should have beaten the Bears, considering they completely shut down the Bears offense. They were unlucky to lose that game. So they haven't been awful, and probably explains why they're favourite at home.
No, they haven't. I mean, defensively, they've let the fewest, they've given up the fewest number of yards on defense. So I mean, the defense has stepped up and done its job. But as it's being touched, it's Will Levis has just become that kind of unknown. He can look good. He has an arm, but he'll do something. He'll do something stupid. He'll throw the ball into Tyreek Stevenson's arms. Like, it's things like that you just can't legislate for as a head coach and a team. This is something that they have to get out of that quarterback, because it has put them behind the 8 ball. They should not be 0-2, but they are. And a lot of it, it's a team sport, but a lot of it comes down on just really bad quarterback decisions. And you mentioned Matt LaFleur. He's somebody, look, Green Bay, I won't be the biggest Green Bay fan, being a Bears fan, but you look at that head coach and you think, you know what? He's one of those head coaches I could trust if I lose my quarterback. He can come up with something. He can take in a backup quarterback, and he can put a game plan in place that will really benefit them. You look at what they done last week. Obviously, there's a lot of running there. They have 261 yards on the ground, as you mentioned earlier, which is a franchise record dating back to, I think, 2003. So, I mean, they know what to do. The Pack are just such a... How would you say, just such an efficient team. They can get over these things because of the systems they have in place, the players they put in place, and the head coach that runs it all. So I think that odds-wise, teams are just looking at the 2 quarterbacks. Maybe it's a backup quarterback against Levis, and Levis at home, and that seems to be how they're going. For me, I think the Pack are probably a stronger team. Even if they have the backup quarterback, I think they will still come up with a plan to beat the Titans. So I'm going to go with a Pack win away, and Levis, you just can't trust that quarterback.
Yeah, I trust the coach, and I trust the Packers to win in Tennessee. I'll tell you another coach I trust is Mike Tomlin, who is at home to Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers in week 3. They host LA. They're 1-point favorites. I think they're worth it just about. The bookie's seen that one as something of a toss-up, but I just look at the way the Steelers team have started this season, and I cannot not see them going 3-0. I don't believe in the Chargers miracle continuing for much longer. Sorry, miracle is slightly overstating the case. I'm being facetious there, but I just think that this game plan from the 1980s, this run-first offense, it's worked in this peculiar start to the NFL season that we've seen, and it's worked because of the teams that they played. They caught the Raiders on a good week in week 1, and they played the Panthers last week, so that's effectively a bye. They win that one 26-3 with no resistance whatsoever offered in the other direction. Pittsburgh is a completely different prospect here, playing at home. Chargers rolling in there are not going to have it their own way. I don't think they're going to be running the ball as effectively through J.K. Dobbins and taking the pressure off Justin Herbert and their relative wide receiver by committee routine that they've been able to roll. I think the Steelers will be well prepared for that. And offensively, the Steelers have been very efficient. They have Justin Fields, I have to say, playing some good football there, looking after the football for the most part. I know he had one fumble. You can't coach all of that out of Justin Fields in just one off season, but he's been throwing the ball well too. He had a gorgeous pass to George Pickens, which was negated by a penalty, but showing you some of what he can do. And in that Arthur Smith offense, which seems to be suiting him a lot better than Luke Getsy's did last year. I like the way the Steelers are rolling here. They've been really sneaky good in that AFC North, and things falling in their favor. And I think it's going to continue for at least one more week. I think the Steelers will take this one. Shane, how do you see it?
Yeah, you're mentioning there the way that the Chargers have approached offense, and I was kind of laughing at Jim Harbaugh's way as he was saying that this week, like Moses, he's going to lean on his staff. But if he's going to part if he's going to try and park the Steelers defense, which has been one of the greatest defenses in the NFL so far this season, like the Red Sea, I think he needs to lean more on his wide receiver and his quarterback. I'm not reading too much into the game against the Panthers. I'm looking more about how the Chargers approached the game against the Raiders in the start. And look, the fact that J.K. Dobbins had 10 carries, Gus Edwards had 11, I'm not quite sure on their averages either. That's fine. I don't think that's going to get you anywhere against a Steelers defense, which has just looked excellent. And we can talk so much about, about game planning, about the fact that this is a Steelers home opener and all that kind of thing. But I think this has to be the time where the Chargers make the decision that, okay, this is a 2-0. This isn't a battle between two 2-0 teams. It's a battle between two 2-0 defenses. What are you going to do differently to try and unlock something? What have you learned from the last two games the Steelers played and are going to decide, I need to come up with something a little bit different? Because if you're trying to keep up with the Chiefs, you can't keep up with the Chiefs by keeping the ball on the ground. For that reason, I'm actually trusting Harbaugh to make the decision to pass the game more, to trust Justin Herbert a bit more, to trust his receivers. Ladd McConkey has had a good couple of games. Trust his receivers a bit more and try and stretch out what Pittsburgh have. Because if you get the Pittsburgh defense something to target in on, if it's a run game that's going very central, if it's a quarterback that's staying very central, they will close in on you incredibly quickly. We've seen that so far this year. So I think the Steelers, the Chargers will be able to unlock their pass game to actually find a few points. And if they're able to score 18 points, do I trust Justin Fields to lead an offense that'll be able to score 18 points against this Chargers defense? And my answer to that is no. I think they'll be able to score 15. So for that reason, I'm actually going for a tight Chargers win here. But I'm not saying that with a very, very high degree of confidence. Anytime I've backed against this Mike Tomlin team, because I don't know, their physical defensive style of play doesn't light up the scoreboard. They find a way to prove people wrong and just say, look, it doesn't matter how we get it over the line. We get it over the line. So I completely understand why the bookies and many people are thinking that the Steelers will be able to close this one out. But I'm kind of backing the Chargers to come in and come away with a little bit of a surprise out of Western Pennsylvania.
Kieran, when we spoke to Joe Alt in the offseason, he was looking forward to squaring off against some of the NFL's best pass rushers over his first couple of games. He had Max Crosby week 1. He's got TJ Watt lining up over his side in week 3. Joe Alt is PFF's highest graded offensive tackle so far this season. So he's really going to relish that challenge. That's been a real bright spot for the Chargers, that O-line in general, but his play as a rookie in particular. And that's going to be one of the key matches in this, surely.
Absolutely. TJ Watt is just standout player for the Steelers right now, and like you said, arguably Alt is the same thing with the Chargers. This is Michigan last year under Harbaugh played the same way that the Chargers are playing right now. He took the ball out of the quarterback's hands, which was JJ McCarthy, and he gave the ball to Blake Corum 30-40 times a game. Harbaugh is using this exact replica blueprint for the Chargers this year. They are run heavy, obviously, with J.K. Dobbins, and they got Gus Edwards out there. But J.K. Dobbins is almost like the standout so far. He's been phenomenal with the ball. This is a team that is night and day from how they were the last 5-6 years. The Chargers were almost like a punchline in the last number of years. Every single game, when they were in the 4 or 5 minutes of the end, and they were up by 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it was, you almost knew that they were going to lose it, and invariably they did. Whether it was a field goal as the clock expired, or they gave up a score late on. They had no backbone. They had no kind of cutting edge, no ability to close out a game or even to claw a game back if they were down 3 or 4. That was their kind of that was their reputation and their hallmark of the last 3-4 years. Now, when Harbaugh came in, he's obviously, we've seen the departures with Eckler and Keenan Allen and those kind of guys, and he's brought in people that could easily have been a Michigan player last year. Ladd McConkey obviously was with Georgia. Quentin Johnson, who has been completely rehabilitated. He was with TCU, who actually made the championship game a couple of years ago. Standout player in college, disappeared last year, was completely anonymous, and now he's back to scoring touchdowns. I really like what Harbaugh is doing, and from somebody who watches so much college football, it's the exact replica of what he did. He's not surprising anybody, but he's doing exactly what he said he did last year in Michigan this year. Now with the Steelers, again, TJ Watt is your standout player, which concerns you as a Steelers fan because you can't expect to put up 15, 16, 17 points a week and expect to win. Sooner or later, they're going to have to explode and get 30-plus points. So that's my concern with the Steelers. And again, there's still that talk between Fields and Russell Wilson, who's going to start. And it looks like Fields is going to go again this week. I don't expect a lot of points. This could be your classic 15-12 kind of game where the kickers dominate. But I like the Chargers in this. I think they're gaining momentum. They're believing in the Harbaugh kind of philosophy. Herbert has totaled 270 yards with 3 touchdowns in his first 2 games, and he's doing just enough to get them in position to win. And Dobbins is averaging 133 yards. So the blueprint is there. He's not throwing picks. He's not getting reckless with the ball. There's no, kind of highlight plays that you'll see on Top 10 on SportsCenter. They're doing what they need to do to get those wins. I like the Chargers in this game. I think they're going to go into Western Pennsylvania and get that win.
Nola, falls to you to make the final pick before we wrap the early window.
Yeah, I like the way the Chargers are kind of developed this year, a little bit more than I thought they would so soon. So I think the Chargers get the win.
All right, the first of the 9 o'clock games that we're going to discuss is Ravens at Cowboys. 2 heavily fancied teams before the season. 2 teams coming off terrible losses. 1 team looking for its first win of the season, remarkably considering how the Ravens played last year. Noel, this is a 1-point game with the bookies. Ravens favoured by 1 going into Arlington. Will they come out with the win?
I think they will. I think what a strange start to the season for them, though. 0-2. Who would have guessed that? I mean, look, there's no disgrace to losing to the Chiefs on the first day, but when you look how it happens and that Isaiah Likely, toenail just hanging over the line, excuse me, like how tough a defeat is that? But then the whole fourth quarter collapse against the Raiders is something that can't happen. And you wonder, obviously the Ravens are going through a big kind of change with Mike McDonald, defensive coordinator, has gone to Seattle. Zach Orr comes in. They lose some players, some other coaches. So maybe that defense is just kind of finding its way with a new setup and a new leader at the top there, because the Ravens, they do need to shore up that pass defense, which is ranking, I think it's last in the NFL actually in terms of the passing. So that needs to be something that they work out. But I do think they're strong enough. I think when you look on offense, they have more than enough there where they can get things going. Obviously, we mentioned Isaiah Likely. He's looked good at the start of the season. Mark Andrews will be coming back. Then obviously you have Henry at running back, who I think we may well see over the next few weeks. He starts to kind of get more and more, because when used correctly, he is a really dominant running back when he just barrels into people and gets those tough yards. And then obviously Lamar Jackson is there, who is a former MVP, 2-time. He can make things happen on the ground or in the air. So if I'm a Ravens fan, I'm not overly worried about how the season has started. I think it's something they can come back from. The Cowboys would kind of worry me a little bit more. I mean, obviously they win in week 1 against the Browns. Zimmer's defense looked really, really good. We did all praise it at the time, but that was against, as we've all talked about, a Browns offense, which you really wouldn't put much stock in. And whereas the Cowboys' offense against the Browns defense, it did enough against a good defense just to score what it needed and to take the win. So I think that, for me, there's still question marks maybe on this Cowboys offense as they go forward. Do they have enough depth after, say, CeeDee Lamb? And is Zeke still the player that you want leading that rush? So for me, I think the Ravens will get it right this weekend. I think they'll get back onto winning ways, and I think they'll go in and get the win.
Shane, one of these teams bounces back, the other one gets bushwhacked. Which way is it going to go?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I think the Ravens might have enough here to go and get the victory, which is a little bit odd because the Cowboys are at home. They are generally have been exceptional at home in the regular season. But last week, obviously, that whole thing has just been completely shattered. What struck me last week about the Cowboys in particular is the fact that a lot of their pass rush and their defensive linemen were pretty much invisible. Like Micah Parsons, I can't remember one significant play he made. He didn't make a sack. I think he only made 2 tackles. So that has to change, and especially considering Lamar Jackson's ability to run, ability to scramble, ability to pick out his receivers sort of in a flowing play as opposed to something which is militantly planned on a whiteboard. His ability to put that pressure on, I'm expecting to be better. So the Cowboys are, I think, on defense anyway, will have enough fix to keep this thing close. The reason why I think the Ravens are going to win though is because I'm looking at Dak Prescott and thinking, okay, you're after losing your first game at home to a Saints team which seems to have the power of God behind them, completely rolled over you from the start. if things start going wrong early, if the Ravens start getting 7-10 points up early on because of their high level game planning, because they know that this game is crucial to their season, if they drop to 0-3, it is an incredibly difficult challenge for them to even make the playoffs, let alone try to push for getting a home game by the time we get to January. I think they're going to plan for this game exquisitely well. So when you're looking at Dak Prescott, what's he going to do? He's going to start playing a little bit of hero ball. We saw that last week. He threw 2 interceptions, even though he attempted nearly 40 passes. And I just think that there is, after the money, the fact that it's at home, I don't know what the media landscape is like when it comes to the Dallas and Cowboys fandom, but I imagine that the pressure and the talk is probably higher than it usually is at this point of the season. Because generally with the Cowboys, after they suffer a loss like they have to the Saints, they generally come out the next week and they get the job done and they have it locked down pretty easily. And I'm not expecting it, because I just think that the Ravens are too good of a team to let themselves be walked over. And when things are tight and when the Cowboys need a hero to come up and save them, Dak Prescott will try to be that man, and I think he will make a mistake, and the pretty strong Ravens secondary will find a way to swat him down, pick him off, and gain momentum. So for that reason, I think Baltimore, because of the game planning of the Harbaugh system, will be able to come away with a victory here.
Kieran, when I find myself struggling to pick a team, I try to imagine what the narrative will look like on America's game if they were to go on and win the Super Bowl. And I'm looking at the Ravens and thinking, the 0-2 Ravens roll into Arlington in crisis. Is this the game where it turns around? And I can kind of almost see that in my mind's eye. I'm not sure if I can necessarily see it the same way for the Cowboys. It's not scientific, but that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you can imagine the kind of the narrative. Dallas-Fort Worth area is in meltdown right now. I mean, it's not great for anybody in that building right now. Jerry's on edge. McCarthy's already a lame duck coach. So, at this stage, are the players even listening to him? They've obviously downgraded a little bit with the offense, especially with the running game. And outside of CD and Brandon Cooks, there is a little bit of a fall off. But if Dallas loses again at home, I mean, it's going to be full meltdown mode. We'll have Stephen A. Smith coming out in some sort of garb, just gloating like crazy. So that'll be something to look forward to. But the bigger story, if that's possible in Big D, will be if the Ravens end up going 0-3. And for that reason, I like the Ravens in this game. I think despite last week, I mean, nobody really gave the Raiders much chance against Baltimore, but nothing really seemed to click last week. Now, Lamar did throw it a lot more. I mean, there was a lot of Zay Flowers in that game, but there was just that inconsistency trying to, that cutting edge wasn't there for Baltimore. 0-3 is not even on the radar for Baltimore. I think that the thing with Baltimore is they're going to be able to see the pass rush coming. And if that's the case, Lamar's got the legs, he's got the wheels like anybody else. Quick little screen pass or a shovel pass over to Derrick Henry, and he's up the gut. So I like Baltimore in this game purely for the fact that they can't lose, because this is one of those games that, it's not possible for them to even think about losing in the context of the season. There's too much talent on that team, notwithstanding losing star players like Patrick Queen on that defense. But they've got to regroup after this, after a fairly tough start of the season. But I like them going into Dallas and kind of perpetuating the misery on the Cowboys and having a great storyline for Monday morning when the Ravens go in there and beat the Cowboys. So give me the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with that. I think eventually the Ravens go on a tear, and I think it starts this week. They're just too good not to. And we move on next to Panthers at Raiders. Panthers taking the trip to Vegas, and they'll be maybe looking to bet it all on black, because something's got to change, they will feel, in their look. Bryce Young benched. The Raiders off the back of that stirring comeback victory against the Ravens that we've just been talking about. Gardner Minshew got a little pep talk on the sidelines from Max Crosby, and next thing you know, he comes out just slinging it, and they managed to pull it out on that walk-off field goal. I liked a lot of what I saw from that Raiders offense at times last week, particularly the emergence of Brock Bowers as a legitimate receiving threat. Pairing him with Devontae Adams makes a big difference to how the Raiders will roll this season. I think they're dangerous. I think that, we talked about it a lot last season about how they were more talented than what was showing up defensively as well. And I think you're seeing some of that as well this season. And that's just a really good win for them last week. And we know the Ravens have been out of sorts, but and we also know the Ravens have this weird habit, and the statistics show it up over the last couple of years, of just dropping odd double-digit leads in the fourth quarter. They've done it more often than any other team in the NFL over the past 3 seasons. it's a strange one, and the Raiders the beneficiaries of it last weekend. I think they're a team that probably is now finally the greater than the sum of their parts. We watched them under Josh McDaniels last year, and they seemed so far below the level of the talent that they actually had around them. I think Antonio Pierce has galvanized them. I think, as I said, Bowers has been a huge addition to that offense, and I think that makes the difference this weekend. That and the fact that they're playing the Panthers, so I think the Raiders are going to win. Shane, sorry.
No worries. I mean, you're trying to quarterback it, and sometimes you drop the ball, as was often the case with Bryce Young last week, and that's okay. I'm looking at this game, and the over/under is 40 points, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Raiders score 37 of them. It's just the unfortunate nature of where the Panthers are right now. There's a little bit of the 2008 Detroit Lions about them at the moment, and look, I mean, we probably expected that. We're probably saying that at some points this time last season as well. They still managed to win 2 games. I'm not quite sure what they have going down the pipeline later on to the season. Is a 36-year-old quarterback in Andy Dalton who hasn't started a game and hasn't been a starter in 4 or 5 years really going to change their fortunes going into Las Vegas? I don't think so. The Panthers' only real chances. They just look at what's happening in New Orleans and says, do you know what? We're in Vegas. Let's just go for everything we can. Down the field, let's just go a little bit mad here and see if we get anything out of it. Is that sustainable? Is that going to get them a victory against a Raiders team, which, as you say, it looks like the sum of its parts, has a defense which is pretty good at getting to the quarterback, as Gardner Minshew, who I think is actually building nicely into the season, and receiving options who I think will really use this game to try and flex out and build up and pad their stats a little bit heading into the later end of the season. It's Raiders all the way for this one, and it's a shame really that we're talking about an NFL caliber team as being sort of pushovers already at this point of the season, and at some point they might prove us wrong. I just don't think it's here.
No, the Bryce wasn't right, but will Andy Dalton lead them to a win in Vegas?
Lads, I'm telling you, the Red Rifle is 3-0 versus the Raiders. 4-0 as 3-0 as a starter and 4-0 overall. So, I mean, obviously that means Panthers are going to get a hiding this weekend. No, look, this Raiders team, I mean, they have some good players in there. I like Gardner Minshew. I think he was one of the better backups in the league, and I actually am happy to see him get a chance as a starter. And who knows, maybe he can live up to early potential and stake that claim and stay a starter. Then you have Devontae Adams and as you mentioned, Brock Bowers, and then on the other side you've got Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins. I mean, them players alone just tower above anything that the Panthers have at the moment. This Panthers team is just in disarray, and you can see a number of years for this team to kind of build back up again. So I can't see anything but a Raiders comprehensive victory in this game.
Kieran?
Yeah, ordinarily when teams make a change at quarterback, it usually leads to a change, but now give me the Raiders.
All right, that brings us to the end of our second segment. We're in the third segment of our Week 3 picks here on the Irish NFL Show, and we are going next to Arizona, where the Lions travel to meet the Cardinals, looking to bounce back from the disappointment of dropping a game to the Bucs last weekend. The Cardinals, of course, coming off that sensational win against LA, where they racked up points, and Marvin Harrison Jr. had a big coming out party. Shane, what do you think this one is going to show us?
Yeah, when I was chatting to Brian yesterday in Buskers, I was kind of breaking this down and sort of as we were kind of breaking down some of the main matchups here. I can really see this being a close game and a bit of a shootout, actually, because both of these teams last week proven that they have really potent offenses. The only difference was every time that the Cardinals had their chance, they took it, and when the Lions had their chance to build up so many yards, they didn't take it. And Jared Goff, when he's attempting 55 passes, still managed to get 300 yards in the air, but gets picked off 2 times and doesn't manage to get a touchdown pass. You know that that's an off week. You know that's something gone wrong with the game plan. And you're playing against a Tampa Bay defense who I think did play well. That's not knocked that down at all. So when I'm looking at this, then I think the real question is, if we're expecting each offense to score 24 points or above, which I think is very possible in this game, who's the defense that's going to come up with something big later on in the fourth quarter to turn the tide? In that question, I think the Detroit have proven themselves to be the more mature team, has proven themselves to be a team that can keep things tight. They can get the big plays in the later part of the games when they really need to. As much as Kyler's has looked really strong, and playing at home. He looked really strong in the first half against the Bills, but didn't look so strong in the second half. When I look at that performance in particular, I'm kind of thinking, are the Cardinals a team that really prepare very well, but maybe don't learn the game as they're playing it when they're playing against a team that keep things tighter than the Rams did the week just gone. So for that reason, I think the Lions have the defense to keep the Cardinals quiet enough in the fourth quarter that they'd be able to sneak a win by a field goal.
Yeah, I think you got to separate, as you were saying, Shane, the signal from the noise here. I thought last weekend was a bit of a noisy result as far as the Lions were concerned. There are lots of other scenarios in which that game would have resulted in a Detroit win, and obviously it didn't. And we've already credited the Bucs and Baker Mayfield for what they were able to do there, and that banged up Tampa Bay defense for the heroic red zone efforts that it put up. I don't think that's something that's repeatable, or that you're necessarily going to see the Lions repeating from week to week. I think they're too good to let that happen more than once in a season. I don't think it's going to repeat itself in Arizona. We talked about how the Cardinals are going to win games this season. We talked about how they won that game against the Rams last week. They got the Rams at a good time, in fairness to them, but you can only beat what's out there in front of you, and the Cardinals piled it on them. That's what you expect from good teams in the NFL. You got to beat the weak teams well. They faced a weakened Rams team and they put them to the sword. And I think this Arizona team are a good team. I really liked what I saw. They have a pass rush now. Dennis Gardeck, I think, racked himself 3 bags last weekend. I think Jared Goff is going to feel a little bit more heat than he did at the weekend. And we know that a Jared Goff who's taken hits is not the same Jared Goff. You can say the same of many quarterbacks, but as we know, with Jared, unfortunately, the drop-off is precipitous. I still think it's going to be a little bit too much of a hill for the Cardinals to climb, even playing at home. Really liked what I saw from Kyler Murray last weekend. It's a perfect passer rating. What more can you say about that? Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously was sensational. They have other options there as well. Trey McBride and Dortch have been carrying the torch. If you want to drop that rhyme, James Conner's been running well too. So that Lions run defense is going to need to be stout. But I think it will be. I think it will be enough, and I think the Lions will emerge with this result. Kieran, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to start off with Arizona. I'm still not a fan. I don't believe in Arizona. I think that, last week was a fluke. They managed to get the Rams. I mean, the Rams had so many injuries, they almost brought the water boy in. That's how many injuries there were out there. And a classic Withnail and I quote, a stopwatch is right twice a week, or twice a day. I'm sorry. I think that was one of the lucky ones for the Cardinals. I think they lucked out, playing a Rams team that was absolutely destroyed. You got the Lions coming into your house. Totally different prospect. Kyler, I'm still not a fan of. I don't really believe in his ability to lead a team. I don't think he's the type of leader that a team needs. Yes, they've got some skill players around there. Detroit's had a bit of a slow start themselves, so I'm not really high on Detroit either. I mean, their red zone offense, their conversion is 28th in the league, and last year they were second. I mean, last year they were converting 66% of chances in the red zone, and now it's only 28. So that's a concern. The law firm of Gibbs and Montgomery haven't really got going yet, so it's time for them to start imposing their will. We all know what Murray did last week. Yeah, he did a great game, but is he able to, be consistent with that? Because week 1, he couldn't complete a pass over 10 yards. Then he goes the exact opposite. What's the true metric here? Which is it? I think the Lions come into Arizona. They're going to enjoy the desert heat, and I think they're going to put up a nice score on Arizona. And it's going to be a real right back down to earth game for Arizona. So give me the Lions by 10.
No, we won't put you on the spot to give us a Withnail and I quote, but we will put you on the spot for your pick, please.
I'll just go with the Lions on that one.
Good stuff. You've got antifreeze. Right, it's 49ers at Rams next up. Niners favored by 7 in this one, Kieran, which is not hard to see considering what we saw from LA in that game we just discussed against Arizona last week.
Yeah, you almost feel sorry for LA. I mean, they're at home, and it's going to be, 80%. 80, yeah. I was about to say 80% Niners fans. I mean, they're just going to take over SoFi, compounding that with the fact that the Rams are all beat up and there's not a lot out there. It's going to be a long day. The Rams have allowed 12 plays of 20 or more yards, in the last 2 games. We've talked about precipitous fall-offs. Without having Noteboom and a couple other pieces around there, John Johnson, Jonah Jackson, key players throughout the field, throughout the team have dropped off. We have got players on IR. We've got players missing a couple of weeks. and they're not able to sustain this kind of course that they had from week one. And that's not even talking about Puka and Cooper Kupp being out as well. So great time for the Niners, even without Debo. It's a great time for the Niners to play them. But it's going to be a real tough month of September into October for Los Angeles. Plus the Niners have allowed opponents to convert 60% of third downs. That's the other question mark, where the Niners really struggled last week with stopping the ball and being able to kind of impose their will as well. So storylines everywhere, but the big one for me is less so what's going on with the Niners and Debo. It's really the story is the Rams, and do they have enough to keep it competitive into the third quarter? Probably not, but this is going to be not quite a rehab game for the Niners, but it's a win they're going to need. So just not enough out there for the Rams to keep it competitive. I like the Niners.
Yeah, not a divisional matchup that the Rams would have relished with the injuries that Kieran's just outlined there, particularly on their offensive line. Noel, is there any way they can pull this one out at home?
I find it hard going up against this 49ers team. Look, we know the 49ers have a couple of injuries themselves. Obviously, McCaffrey is on IR, but Mason comes in and just it looks like they don't absolutely miss a beat at all there in the run game. He just keeps going. Then Deebo Samuel, I think, is doubtful, and George Kittle, I believe, didn't train today. So even with those players gone, as Kieran says, the story is the injuries on the other side of the ball, and they have been decimated. Their two best wide receivers, who are real game changers and can make things happen, are gone. You just look at it. I mean, the first week they looked okay on defense. We wondered, will they be missing Aaron Donald? They obviously bring in a couple of rookies, and Jared Verse. They look good. Then last weekend, it just gets torn to shreds by the Cardinals. And I just think this 49ers team, they had a bad result last week. They'll be right up for this one coming up this weekend. And I think they'll just be way, way too strong. The Rams, Kieran said it, the Rams are in for it to a few weeks. It could get nasty for them in a few games because they've been completely decimated. So for me, it's the 49ers.
We used to talk about this last season, and Colin used to say regularly the 49ers have the best starters in the league. And we saw last season when you got a couple of guys out, they're not the same team. And particularly when the couple of guys include Christian McCaffrey. Really interesting segment for people who might not have seen it yet. Bill Belichick Inside the NFL, where he breaks down the boot and stretch and traces the origin of that back to Mike Shanahan. And also, how Gary Kubiak learned it and how you're seeing it in other offenses now and through Gary's son, Clint, obviously. But one of the keys to that when Mike Shanahan first ran it was that they had Terrell Owens running those cuts, either getting the outside or cutting it back, just the way CMC does for the 49ers. And having a running back with that kind of talent makes all the difference in the world to what Kyle Shanahan and that 49ers offense are trying to do. Jordan Mason is a passable backup for Christian McCaffrey, and to be fair, he's done a lot better than possible over the past couple of weeks. But not having that kind of talent available does make a difference, and it is going to make a difference in the longer run. That CMC injury is a concern to me for the 49ers going forwards. Not necessarily this weekend, though. I just think the Rams themselves are too banged up to be able to contain that Niners team on either side. And yeah, they're without George Kittle too. That's a concern. Charvarius Ward in that secondary is a loss for the 49ers as well defensively. But I think they will be able to bring enough, not least in terms of the fan numbers they're going to bring to SoFi, to take care of the Rams. So that's the way I see this one going with a 49ers win. Shane?
Yeah, I think the 49ers are going to win in Candlestick South.
All right, Kieran, you're next up with Dolphins at Seahawks. Seattle favoured in this one. They just about got over New England last weekend, but they're not necessarily going to get the best the Dolphins can give to them, given that Tua, unfortunately, is still out following that concussion in the last game, and the Dolphins really in a very difficult situation right now.
Yeah, and we've seen what the Dolphins have been like in the last couple of years. Whenever Tua had a game or two off or a stretch, it's a totally different team. The ability to get the ball out fast, the ability to have these electric plays with Tyreek and with Jalen Waddle, it won't be there. Skylar Thompson has had he's had 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions as a starter in the league. That's not encouraging for anybody. So Tyler Huntley's probably going to be on the sidelines. It's probably being told by McDaniel to get ready if things go south, which in turn will probably lead the Dolphins to run the ball a lot. This is a long road trip for the Dolphins, having to go all the way to Seattle. I mean, you're going from the bottom right of the country to the top left. That's a huge road trip. and especially with the banged up status. Now I'm looking at the injury report. A couple of key players look like they'll play, but they're kind of on the injury report right now, as teams generally do. Kenneth Walker and Raheem Mostert are one of the two, or two of the names that are on the report that'll probably be up. They'll be probable up until game time, but I expect them to play. But when you factor in the distance that Miami's got to go, and then you add in the loss of Tua, you add in the situation that everybody's in, it's not going to be that fast-paced offense. Thompson will not be throwing the ball 40 yards to Tyreek Hill, will be jetting up, unless something crazy happens. But it's going to be a real big leveler. And Seattle, with the way that they've been playing, Kenneth Walker's just been a phenomenal running back right now. He's just been doing everything that the Seahawks need. And DK Metcalf came more into the game last week also. So tough trip for the Dolphins. It's going to be hard for me to see anything but a Seattle win. I think they're just going to impose the will. Dolphins are usually not great on the road, especially. It's not cold weather yet in Seattle in September, but it's not going to be the typical weather that Miami will be used to in the rest of the country in September. So that might be a factor too. I just see a lot of DK and Smith and Jigba for Seattle on a not so super defense for the Dolphins. So I like Seattle in this one.
Yeah, you've discussed a lot of the travails and the reasons why we are very doubtful that the Dolphins make this a successful road trip, Kieran. And I think, you also touched on some of the things that mean that the Seahawks will go into this one optimistically. If you check in on where Mike Macdonald and the Seahawks slight rebuild project is at, what would they have wanted? They would have wanted better performance on the defensive side of the ball. Check that mark. And they would have wanted to see a little bit more explosion offensively. They would have wanted to see the first iteration they got of Geno, not necessarily the slight photocopy of a photocopy field that we got last year. Key to that, obviously, has been, as you said, Kieran, that DK Metcalf steps up and, actually focuses on his game instead of getting into rows. And one thing that I was hoping to see last season was, a player that I was very excited to watch as a rookie, Jackson Smith and Jig, but didn't quite give us what I was looking for last year. But he was in 3 digits last weekend, which is really encouraging to see, alongside DK Metcalf, I think also went for over 100 yards. I think he racked up 125 against a very strong New England secondary too. We've talked up Christian Gonzalez in particular. We talked up what that Patriots defense was capable of, and they had another good game last weekend. But I thought it was telling that DK got into the game as much as he did, and that also that they got Jackson Smith and Jigba involved. They're passing the ball really well. They've got a balanced attack, as you said, Kieran, with not only Walker but also Charbonnet's having a decent season. Both of them also active out of the backfield catching passes. I think that's going to expose this Miami defense, which is strong up front, but has been exposed a little bit on the back end. I don't think Jalen Ramsey is the player he was, and he got cut out a couple of times last weekend. I think he's got a lot of pain coming his way this weekend, given how much he's going to have to handle, and that's going to turn it for Seattle, in my opinion. Shane?
My confidence in the Dolphins to top the AFC East, as I predicted at the start of the season, was completely shattered last Thursday night. Forget about what the injury to Tua. It was everything that happened in the lead up to that made me think, my God, this Dolphins team are not prepared for what was one of the most important games of their season. The amount of times that a snap came from the center that was almost over to his head, he had to kind of reach up for it there for losing maybe half a second on the play, completely missed timing, was ridiculous. That's attention to detail which wasn't nailed down. Defense, when they tried to read what Josh Allen was supposed to be doing, everything they did was packed into the center, which does not work against the Bills. The Bills just exploited it, scored 31 points. Happy days, grand job. Fly back out of Florida and enjoy the weekend. I don't think the Dolphins team really grasp in some of these situations how to properly plan for tough games. And considering that Tua is gone, and what we're relying on is those fast receivers to make big yak plays, really, to explode to life against a Seattle defense who I think will be smart enough to contain what those wide receivers will be able to do. I just don't trust that Miami will have a fully formed plan to know what to do and come in here, especially considering in fairness, very unfortunate situation which is happening with Tua. And in terms of the Seattle offense, the Patriots proved one thing last week, is that if you give Seattle's receivers and Geno Smith an extra half a second to a second to make a decision and to get separated, That's when that offense turns from a 3-star offense to a 5-star offense. Then we're getting 2 receivers for over 100 yards. Geno Smith looked excellent in the fourth quarter and in that final overtime drive where they kicked the field goal to win against the Patriots defense, which outside of Christian Gonzalez kind of looked a bit tired going into the fourth quarter. So considering that the Dolphins are coming into this, as Kieran alluded to, on a long road trip, fair enough to have a few days extra rest from playing Thursday night last week. The further we get into this game, the more that Seattle are going to take control. I don't believe in the Dolphins to have a strong enough plan to take control in the first half, and I don't believe in their ability to stay fit enough to keep things close in the second. So it's Seattle by 4, according to the bookies. I think it's Seattle by a lot more than that.
Noel, your pick?
I'm going for Seattle in this one.
All right, good stuff. Our final game on Sunday then is Chiefs at Falcons in Sunday Night Football. Chiefs favoured by 3 there, Noel. Falcons coming off that impressive win against the Eagles. Kirk Cousins with that great drive down the field to get them the win there after Saquon dropped the ball, which Kieran will kill me if I don't remind people he did. Where do you see this one heading, and can the Falcons back it up?
Yeah, I think this is actually going to be an interesting one. I mean, what a difference a week makes. A week ago, the Falcons are in pistol or shotgun 96% of the time, and people are talking about, oh no, Cousins not right. He mustn't be right if that's the way they're going. This weekend, then it's all changed. He's obviously under center a lot more. He spreads the ball out a lot. The Falcons' offense this weekend was really balanced. We have, I think, 6 or 7 different receivers getting the ball, none for over 100 yards, but they're all productive. Then they get 150 yards rushing between the 2 running backs, Algier and Bijan Robinson. Sorry, he's blanking there. So the Falcons offense this weekend did look really balanced and really positive. And I think if things do click for them, if that's the way it kind of develops, they can be a dangerous offense that can put teams under pressure. But look, the Chiefs are the Chiefs. They have a couple of close games. The first couple of games in the season. Obviously, we talk about Likely's toe. And then this weekend against the Bengals, it was a back and forth one that they just nipped at the end. But that's the kind of team they are. When you have Patrick Mahomes, when you have Rashee Rice, when you have, tight end Jason or Kelsey. Sorry,
Travis.
Getting confused there. Travis Kelsey. I'm getting, because obviously they look similar to
Mr.
brothers.
Swift.
Yeah, but these are the kind of players that can, these are Super Bowl winners. These are players that change games. I think the Pacheco injury could be a big one. That could unbalance them there a little bit. That could be something that maybe knocks them back. But I think overall, again, look, these guys are where they are for a reason. Andy Reid is a top head coach, and I think this Chiefs team will be strong enough to beat the Falcons. But I do think this Falcons offense, if it continues to go the way it was last week, can put it up to them, and it can be an interesting game. But I think the Chiefs are probably just a little too strong.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there, Noel. I think the Falcons coming into this season, I picked them to win the division, and I'm still not necessarily moving off that one this early in the season, but I didn't expect it to be right that quickly because they have an awful lot to do. You're bringing Cousins into a new system. He hasn't had a huge amount of time to prepare given his recovery from injury. He was never going to be 100% right for week 1, and indeed that's how it's transpired. I think there's an extent to which you could succumb to the peak end bias following that final drive against the Eagles and think, wow, that's the Kirk Cousins we're going to see throughout the game, forgetting that that's not the Kirk Cousins that we saw throughout that game. It is improving, and it is going to improve week on week. And in a way, they're catching the Chiefs at not a terrible time. Isaiah Pacheco's a big loss. How well is Carson Steele, the fullback, going to fill in for what he was able to do? Questionable. I'd say that's a bit of a doubt. So over to you, Carson, to prove us wrong. We haven't necessarily seen, as Rory was just saying in the comment we flashed up on screen there, Travis Kelce be the old Travis Kelce. In fact, he's looked like old Travis Kelce, as in losing a yard and not quite where the Chiefs would ideally want him to be. Rashee Rice has shown up in flashes. That seems to be what Rashee Rice does. You're not necessarily seeing consistent, volume and the sort of targets and receptions that you want to see from your WR1. And, no more than the regular season Cowboys kind of flatter to deceive, the regular season Chiefs just do enough. And that's what they specialize in. They know what they're preparing for. They know it's a marathon and not a sprint. And they've run that marathon a hell of a lot better than anyone else has. That's why they're back-to-back champions. I think it's going to be a close game. I think that 3-point line is just about right. It really is a field goal game for me. But the Chiefs do what the Chiefs do, and they emerge just on the right side of that one. Shane?
Yeah, I think it's going to be simply a tale of two quarterbacks, which I know can be said about a lot of American football games, but I think it really counts for this one because if Patrick Mahomes looks at his performance last week and decides, you know what, I actually need to be a bit more aggressive here and try to beat Pat Mahomes, contender for the greatest of all time, and not Pat Mahomes, check down merchant, but managed to get enough done against the Bengals team in what was a fantastically entertaining game last week, then I think the Chiefs are going to be a force to be reckoned with. And you look what the Chiefs have in the defensive side of the ball. Spagnuolo's defense is not going to be a defense which is only going to sack Kirk Cousins once all night, as was the case on Monday Night Football last week. And Kirk, when he got that game-winning drive, was because he was given a bit more room. Now, as I was saying earlier, the Eagles defense also gave wide receivers room, which the Chiefs defense probably wouldn't. So for that reason, I think the Chiefs defense has plenty here to lock it down early on. As much as I imagine there's a few tricks up Atlanta's sleeve which they're saving for this game because they know it's prime time, they know it's against the reigning Super Bowl champions, they know they've all the new pieces coming together, new head coach. This is definitely a game they marked in their calendars, and we can expect some interesting things to come out, I think, especially in how they attack this game offensively. But the later we get into the game, the more that the Chiefs will just take control, and that's the reason I think they're going to win this.
And the final pick of the evening falls to you, Kieran.
Yeah, today, this is going to be the game that the Chiefs' luck runs out. There'll be no DPIs. Give me the Falcons. You like that? You like that?
And we will see whether the refs beg to differ with you when that game takes place on Sunday night. Thursday night, for those of you watching us live, you can still check out our TNF preview with Shane and Kieran wherever you get your podcasts. And we will have, incidentally, a podcast out at lunchtime on Monday previewing the two remaining games that we haven't covered here. That's Jags at Bills and Commanders at Cincinnati to face the Bengals. We're back then on Monday evening to recap all the main talking points from Sunday alongside our instant reaction podcast, which is available from 2 a.m. going into Monday, because we never sleep here to tide you over on your early morning commute. But that is us for now on our week 3 preview on the Irish NFL Show. Take care.